Tokyo Tower 8302, cancel IFR, VFR landing. Departed Chiba, request landing.
Roger, 8302. Passing Chiba. Report right base, runway 33 right. Wind 020, 10 knots. Over.
Roger, report right base, 33 right.
All Nippon, Jet 8302, traffic. Convair 880 departed outer marker 30 seconds ago. Do you have aircraft in sight? Over.
302, this is time negative. Long base now.
What you just heard were the last words spoken by the pilots of All Nippon Airways Flight 60. When you think of air disasters occurring in Japan, you probably think of Japan Airlines 123, the worst accident involving a single plane that killed 520 people. 19 years before this, though, was another flight that at the time was deemed the worst accident involving a single plane. Its cause was debated very heavily, and the investigation team did not come to a conclusion that people agreed on. And on the nights of February 4th, 1966, All Nippon Airways Flight 60, carrying 126 passengers and 7 crew members, mysteriously crashed into Tokyo Bay, killing all on board. All Nippon Airways Flight 60 was a series of accidents in Japan that rocked the public's confidence in aviation. It was a scheduled flight from Sapporo Chitose Airport to Tokyo Haneda. Sapporo Chitose is not a military airbase, but it was once Hokkaido's primary civilian airport until the construction of New Chitose in 1988. At the time, Tokyo Haneda Airport had 3 runways. There were 2 parallel runways, one designated 33 left and right and the other 15 left and right, and one runway marked 22 and 4 that would cross between the parallel runways. The aircraft operating All Nippon Flight 60 was a Boeing 727-100, registered as Juliet Alpha 8302 and had less than 1,600 flight hours logged. Flight 60 departed the gate at 5:52 p.m. and was scheduled to arrive at Haneda at 7:02 p.m. The pilots had radioed that they were canceling their IFR to go VFR on approach to Haneda. All Nippon Flight 60 was supposed to go to Edogawa Point, but instead took a shortcut and flew straight into the base leg. The plane returned to the tower and informed them that they were on Longa Base. Because Flight 60 had taken such a great shortcut, the tower had advised Japan Airlines Flight 74, a Convair 880, which was also landing, to change his landing runway to avoid hitting the All Nippon plane. During this time, an IFR flight plan was not mandatory, and it could be cancelled if the captain so desired. Some captains started competing to see who could take the fastest route to the destination. Planes in Japan were not required to be equipped with a black box or a CVR, and so what comes next is the ATC transcript. Flights back then in Japan were referred to by their tail number, but if it was a flight that wasn't from Japan, they would refer to them by their flight number.
Tokyo approach, All Nippon 8302.
302 approach, go ahead.
Roger 302, Daigo at 48, estimate Tokyo VOR 56, now descending to 14,000, passing 250.
302, Roger, clear to Kizurazu outer marker via Tokyo Onmi, OB2, direct maintaining 14,000, over. For about 4 minutes, Juliet Alpha 8302 would not talk to approach. Juliet Alpha 8302 was talking to the landing aircraft, and they started speaking to approach when they were climbing through flight level 160.
Tokyo 8302, passing 16,000.
8302, Roger, after Tokyo Omni descend to and maintain 12,000.
Roger, maintain 12,000 after passing Tokyo VOR.
302, revise, continue descend and maintain 10,000.
302, passing 14.
8302, say again. When Tokyo approach requested they say their transmission again. 8302 didn't respond for some reason.
8302, deploy Tokyo VOR.
A302, roger.
A302, passing 11,000.
A302, roger, maintain 8,000.
Roger, maintain 10,000.
302, affirmative.
Roger.
The tower made a mistake and caught out the wrong altitude, but Julie Alpha A302 corrected him. A302, squawk Alpha 30.
Roger, 30.
302, radar contact.
Roger.
It was at this time that radar at Tokyo Terminal Radar Control Station picked up the plane. It was about 17 to 18 miles from the airport.
Tokyo A302, cancel IFR, present time.
302, roger, contact Tokyo Tower, approaching Edogawa.
Roger.
They flew over Chiba just fine, but after radar contact, they canceled their IFR for a VFR landing, taking a shortcut over the Tokyo Bay. After this, the tower at Haneda took over.
Tokyo Tower A302, cancel IFR, VFR landing. Departed Shiba, request landing.
Roger, A302, passing Chiba. Report right base, runway 33 right. Wind 020, 10 knots. Over.
Roger, report right base, 33 right.
All Nippon, Jet A302, traffic. Convair 880 departed outer marker 30 seconds ago. Do you have aircraft in sight? Over.
J02, this is time negative. Long base now.
Roger 302, continue approach and brake. Brake. Japan Airline 8024, Fisher runway 33 left. 33 left. Wind 020, 10 knots. Report 5 mile final. Over.
When they were instructed to continue approach, the tower couldn't see their landing lights, and so they were instructed to turn it on, but they just wouldn't get a response back from them.
A302, shows your landing light. Over. All Nippon Jet A302, request your present position. Over. All Nippon Jet A302, Tokyo Tower, how do you hear me? Over.
The only aircraft they saw with lights was the Convair 880 from earlier, with no sign of the ANA plane. Japan Airlines Flight 724 landed on 33 left, and 4 minutes after, a Canadian Pacific DC-8 would also land on runway 33 left, with no sign of the other aircraft. At 7:13 p.m., the air traffic controller reported that Julie Alpha A302 was in trouble to the Tokyo Air Navigation Office. They went and checked Shimohusa Air Base to see if the plane had diverted to there, but it wasn't there. They also checked Kisarazu Air Base, but it too was not there. After 30 minutes of radio silence, an emergency rescue operation was started by the Coast Guard. The Ministry of Defense, U.S. Military, and Ministry of Transport, now Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, all helped find this plane. The police and Coast Guard had gotten many reports of flames in the sky and in the waters. The pilots of Japan Airlines Flight 724, a cargo ship coming from Kisarazu, and a Maruzen oil employee all reported that they saw flames in the sky and the ocean lighting up. The relevant authorities started focusing their search off the coast of Haneda in Tokyo Bay. A search plane had found a wing piece with ANA markings and parts of the interior lining. The crash appeared to have happened just moments after that they lost radio communication of the plane. When they pulled the wreckage, the clock on the instrument panel said 19:05. They found all the bodies except one passenger, which were later washed ashore in Yokosuka. The bodies were found with burn marks. There are many theories as to what happened to this plane. One theory suggests that it was just pilot error. The theory suggests that the captain was overconfident in his abilities of his aircraft and descended very rapidly and either didn't check or misread their altimeter to see how low they were. Other theories seem to suggest that there is a defect in the wing, which caused the ground spoilers to deploy, making the plane fall out of the sky, or that the engine was just defective to begin with, which would have caused engine trouble. Engine number 3 kept on having problems even after it was overhauled and installed back onto the plane. On the day of the accident though, it was actually operating normally. When they pulled the wreckage up from the water, they didn't find the third engine until much later, and when they did, it was discovered that the fan blades of the engines were still spinning until the point of impact and had sucked in debris from the plane when it hit the water, indicating that the engine was still providing enough power. The US investigators and engineers from Boeing helped them and concluded that the plane was operating normally and that the pilot was the cause of the crash. An investigation that happened prior to this accident in the US found out that the pilots of the 727 were unfamiliar with the steep angle of descent compared to the older props and jets. To further add to this, the 727 was a brand new plane, and it was All Nippon Airways' first jet aircraft, so the pilots weren't really used to how it flew. The 727 was advertised as the most advanced aircraft of its time. It had new features which allowed it to operate out of small airfields, and its flaps were abnormally big and complex, which allowed the plane to descend quicker, making it able to lose altitude really quickly. Flaps on a plane are used to improve the performance at low altitudes. Extending them increases the wings area, and they help generate more lift at slower speeds. The increased area of the wing also causes a drag, which slows the plane down and in turn, able to have a much steeper approach on landing. The same thing occurred again 2 years later, when the Japan Airlines 727-100 had its ground spoilers activate in the air, when it only should be activated on the ground. This plane, however, didn't suffer the same fate, as it didn't crash and they were IFR flying. In response to this, they conducted flight experiments with the wreckage of the accident aircraft to see if the ground spoiler malfunctioning was a possibility, and they estimated how much altitude the plane had by doing water contact experiments by using a model of the plane and the wreckage. It was confirmed that in a critical angle of attack, the airflow separates at the wing roots, and the turbulent air that was coming off the wing was causing the engines to surge and the plane to stall through wind tunnel experiments. The ground spoiler problem was not mentioned in the report. Since most planes in Japan were not equipped with a black box or CVR, it was very hard to determine why it crashed. But since the entire plane was essentially recovered, they had decided to focus on the wreckage of the aircraft. As they experimented with the flight characteristics of the 727, most of the conclusions led to the pilot being at fault, but other members of the investigation team were against that fact and disputed that it was a problem with the airframe. But after 4 years had passed, it was officially stated that the crash was unknown. Many of the passengers on this flight were tourists coming back from the Sapporo Snow Festival, but with them were also winners from the Standard Shoes raffle. The Standard Shoe Corporation was one of the 5 major Japanese manufacturers of shoes before and after World War II. In 1998, it went out of business and was liquidated through the civil rehabilitation law in Japan. The company was later restarted back up by former employees and still operates to this day. 24 out of 5,000 people won that raffle, and ironically, they were very unlucky. Many other people were on business trips, such as Hayashima Kiichi, the founder of Asahiya Bookstore, Shibata Hirota, founder of Shibata Bookstore, Kiyota Yukio, an editor of a monthly private magazine, and Masao Oshita, the president of an art book publisher. Hasegawa Katsutoshi, a sumo wrestler, was supposed to be on this flight but cancelled it due to meeting an old friend in Sapporo. Planes in Japan after this were required to have a black box equipped, and VFR flights that completely ignored the tower's instructions were forbidden. All flights should not be flown with an IFR flight plan. 1966 in general was a terrible year for Japanese aviation, as just a month later after this disaster, Canadian Pacific Flight 402, a DC-8, struck the approach lights in a seawall at Haneda during a night landing in poor visibility. It killed 64 out of the 72 people on board. And less than 24 hours later, BOAC Flight 911, a 707, taxied past the smoldering wreckage of the Canadian Pacific DC-8 and would shortly break up in flight when it had encountered severe turbulence over Mount Fuji, killing all 124 people on board. 5 months later, a Convoy 880 operated by Japan Airlines, leased from Japan Domestic Airlines, was on a training flight and crashed while on takeoff. All of the 5 crew members on board were killed. Then in November, another accident involving another ANA plane took place. An All Nippon YS-11 crashed into the Seto Inland Sea while attempting a go-around on runway 31 at Matsuyama Airport. There were no survivors. Since All Nippon Airways had 2 fatal accidents in 1 year, it lost people's trust and lots of money. The president at the time, Kaiheta Okazaki, resigned to take responsibility in 1967.